Hello, Scott here, and welcome to another episode of It's Pronounced Zeen, the series where I take a deep dive into old school tabletop role-playing game magazines, zines, and other periodicals, and see what ancient treasures or wisdom lie within. And for this episode, I have picked out the oldest copy of White Dwarf that I own, issue number 15, October through November 1979. Just a little bit of note here. I am not a White Dwarf aficionado. White Dwarf magazine was available back in the day when I was into role-playing games, as it was through many locations throughout the United States. It wasn't just a UK periodical. It was available in the USA, Canada, Australia, and so on. But primarily about the time that I started getting into role-playing games pretty heavily with me and my other friends, White Dwarf had already become a house magazine for Games Workshop. And since none of us were really any sort of miniature warfare fans, or we never really played any sort of miniature warfare or anything such as that, involving Warhammer Fantasy or Warhammer 40K, we would have completely overlooked it. And so my discovery of White Dwarf began very, very, very late in life. Upwards of about maybe 3 years ago when I got my first issue of White Dwarf, which I believe was this one, to be perfectly honest. I don't own many. I own maybe 10 or so. Most of them were provided by friends and selected by friends over in the UK as interesting issues that had a lot of special things that White Dwarf was known for, as it progressed and is remembered for to this day. So yes, but the primary reason why I want to take a look at this one is it is the oldest physical copy that I own of White Dwarf, and I do like to go back further into the hobby's history with these periodicals and just kind of see, what information does it provide within? Is this information that has become extremely dated as the hobby has progressed through many transitions over the years? Is it providing wisdom that still holds true to this day? Or could it be a little bit of a little nugget of information that has long since been forgotten, but could be easily relevant and utilized in the hobby currently? So, first off, this is fairly relevant now because it is October. It is the Halloween season, and we see that there is a cover on here of what looks to be your standard universal type monster, the werewolf with a relatively humanoid face, tattered clothes, making his way through some sort of countryside, either fleeing from the local villagers or out hunting for his next victim. And this wonderful image was done by, I committed this to memory, but my memory is shot, by Mr. Eddie Jones. So, wonderful, wonderful cover here. And if it doesn't, most special editions of several of these periodicals, if they are monthly, they do have a Halloween cover that essentially tells you without even seeing the date that, maybe this either has to do with horror or it's relevant to Halloween. But we'll find out that I think the only Halloween aspect about this issue of White Dwarf is simply the cover. All right, so let's dive in. So some of these references in here are going to be exclusively UK centric. Some of these, for those who, like me, who did not grow up reading the older editions of White Dwarf in the States, some of these things may not ring a bell for anyone. Whereas for others, some of the UK viewers here, this is going to definitely push the nostalgia button for a lot of these things. So starting off, excuse me. So we have a inside cover from Tangley Model Workshop Limited. This is post free mail order UK and BFPO second edition monster catalog available for 50 pence. So yeah, is miniature model company store? I don't know, but it is the illustration is fantastic as it depicts what seems to be some sort of barbarian relaxing at home after a long day's work of raiding or adventuring. He's got a wonderful cat laying on his lap. his companion there, pouring a cup of tea into his drinking horn as he's having a sit and a rest. So, carrying on, we have the Citadel Miniatures Limited advertisement here, which is going to go through all the different variety of minis at the time, from both Citadel, Dark Ages, Ralpartha, and so on. Okay, and then as we turn further in, we've got some more advertisements here, and then we're starting to get into somewhat familiar territory, at least for me. So first off, we have certain offerings from Avalon Hill, new games being Magic Realm and Dune, the famous Dune game that has seen a couple iterations and is still widely popular and played in both its old format and its current format. We have UFO, and we have Starship Troopers here. And then carrying on, we have Fantasy Grounds Unlimited, FGU. FGU, some of you may know FGU from such role-playing games as Bushido and Flashing Blades and so on. But these offerings here don't necessarily look like role-playing games. They look like more board games. So we've got Gangster, which is relive the Prohibition, react to terrorist attack, build criminal organizations. All the excitement is here in one box. And we have Middle Sea, a multiplayer game that recreates the growth and conflict between Christian and Muslim empires of the Middle Ages, set in the Mediterranean world of roughly 1200 AD. And then finally, we have Colony Delta. The year is 2213 AD. Man has expanded from his humble beginnings to colonize far-flung star systems. The furthest such colony is Delta, the fourth planet of a sun barely visible from Earth. Colony Delta is exciting, fast-moving game of conflict in a science fiction setting for 2 players. Each depends upon exploitation of the planet's resources through farming and mining for survival while keeping the enemy off balance with his military forces. Right. Cool. And then carrying on, we have some additional things from a Creative Wargames Workshop. We have Junta, the game of power, intrigue, money, and revolution, the Emerald Tablet, and 1776. And then we have an advertisement here for Games Day 5, Britain's premier games convention, Saturday the 20th, October 1979, from 10:30 to 6 p.m. It's going to have free competitions, trade stands, personalities, used game auctions, clubs, painting competitions, war games, tabletop. Just tabletop, okay? Board game, okay, tabletop, board games, fantasy games, abstract games, family games, bar food, etc., etc. Okay? Great. So White Dwarf. We are at the inside with features and departments. Current editor of White Dwarf at this time was Ian Livingston. Feature editors Albie Flore, Steve Jackson, Don Turnbull. Cover by Eddie Jones, and then further artwork by Russ Nicholson, Paul Jones, Dave Griffiths, Chris Baker, Polly Wilson, and published by Games Workshop. So, beginning, we have a little paragraph here from Ian Livingston. On the 20th October at the Royal Horticulture Hall, the 5th annual Games Day will take place. This year, however, will give British gamers the opportunity to voice their opinions on on the games they play. For some years now, the Americans have had their own awards, the Charles Roberts Awards and the Strategist Club Awards, but nothing similar existed in the UK. At Games Day 5, the first of the annual Games Day Awards will be made. Obviously, many of these awards will go to American companies in the games categories, but there are plenty of UK miniature companies, magazines, and personalities to catch the votes in the respective categories. People who have not yet voted but wish to should write to Games Workshop for an official voting form, but write in quickly as the closing date for all postal votes is 15th October. So yes, so put those colonialists back into their damn place. This is our land, our territory. We want the awards for ourselves. So, Now, the other thing that I've noticed, as I said, I'm relatively recent to White Dwarf and its original setup and design is White Dwarf is infinitely shorter in its size and scope as compared to things such as Dragon and Dungeon and other magazines. But which is nice because sometimes I do feel some of the things within Dragon can be a bit bloated. Going through some of the old ones, as there is definitely some filler put in there, not including advertisements to kind of warrant the cost of the magazine. So, so in this issue, though, we have features. We have How to Lose Hit Points and Survive, presented by Roger Musin. Expanding Universe, Suggested Additions to Traveler by Andy Slack. The Barbarian, an introductory fantasy board game by Ian Livingston, which, similar to other magazines, they do provide little fold out or tear out or other sorts of games that are within the issue. And then we have Descent into the Depths of the Earth, Advice on Running the AD&D D modules by Don Turnbull. All right. Excuse me a moment. It is allergy season at Casa Orcusdorkus, so I am completely dried out. So I apologize for taking several breaks to have a sip of water to keep my mouth from turning to dried parchment. So this is an interesting one. I've read through this issue before, so this isn't my original look at this one. But it's one of those things to know. Again, perspective from the past, perspective through history, and perspective through certain things in regards to the hobby. And I'm sure it's no shock and surprise that the concept of hit points within a role-playing game was something that not everyone was there wasn't a universal agreement on it. That these provided the perfect set of rules in dealing with damage to your character or to other creatures or monsters in regards to combat and battle. So you will find within not just White Dwarf, not just Dragon, but quite a few magazines and zines and fanzines and so on. A lot of different ways that people deal with hit points, which I feel eventually does evolve into how damage is handled to this very day. As if you go to anything that's really not D&D centric, that there's quite a few methods for handling damage taken, and likewise, recovery and healing, and so on and so forth. Representation of that within the game. So, but what does Roger Musin say? So I'm not going to go into this full article. You can definitely find a copy of this through the Anna Archive. I will put a link to it in the description. But he starts by saying, here's a problem for you. What have the following two grouses got in common? The first is my own. That little business of the strange fact that a dragon breathing 30 points of damage at a helpless low-level magician, and ditto, high-level fighter frazzles the one but fails to kill the other. In White Dwarf 6, I queried whether gaining experience ought to really have this asbestosing, okay, is that a word? Effect. The second complaint comes from no less a person than Gary Gygax himself. His objection, expressed in White Dwarf 7, refers to the widespread and unrealistic practice of selling magic items to players. There's more than one D&D campaign with a ye old magic shop in it where parties may stock up with scrolls and potions for very reasonable rates, and this, as Gary Gygax very rightfully points out, is neither credible nor desirable. The answer. Dissimilar as they seem, these two objections stem ultimately from the same source, as this article show. Let's deal with the magic problem first. One question that has yet to be asked is this: why does such a proliferation of magic items arise? Is it just a lot of ego tripping comparable to souping the game with vibroblades? No. Much of it occurs because given the D&D game system at present, a large amount of magic is necessary to make a campaign work properly. Look at it this way. Suppose you have a moderately strong party interested in hauling some decent treasure out of 5th level. The first problem is getting the treasure. Few DMs are going to let a party trick a monster out of its goodies, so that means a fight. And assuming the party is not well equipped with fireball wands and the like, a fight means losing hit points, and plenty of them. So after a tough battle, the party have got the treasure. Now they have to meet the second problem, getting it out. And getting back up all those stairs without meeting wandering monster is not going to be easy. In most dungeons, the chances of meeting a really dangerous wanderer are high. And in many dungeon monsters attack automatically. If a party is already badly damaged from the first fight, they are in extreme danger. Excuse me. There are two ways around this problem for the party. One is this. They must have scrolls. Not just any scrolls that they might have found, but the right scrolls. Sleep, web, protection from evil, 10-foot radius, fireball are the usual ones. With these, a low-level magician or magic reading sword can stave off at least one encounter. The only solution is to have potions. Again, not just any potion that the DM has rolled randomly, but particular potions, healing and extra healing. With these, the party can get back sufficient hit points to withstand another fight. Agreed, having a high-level magician and cleric in the party will have much the same effect, but in my experience, these characters are hard to come by unless they can be safely escorted to low levels in the first place so that they can find sufficient treasure to progress from adept to something more respectable. Clerics don't gain experience very rapidly as long as the party sticks to roughing up kobolds. So if a party are going to have a chance of A, doing well, while B, surviving, they usually need to be able to select the magic items they need for a dangerous expedition. But the problem wouldn't arise if it were possible for a normal party, without heavy artillery support, to battle powerful monsters without getting hacked limbless each time. After all, would you pick a fight with a Minotaur if you knew that you could not escape getting wounded? The root of the matter is the business of hit points. All right. The Advanced D&D Player's Handbook clearly states that hit points do not exclusively reflect physical damage, but also energy, combat ability, etc. And it makes a good point. I think a lot of people mistake that, that hit points are kind of like, ethereal in what they actually define. I mean, they encompass a lot of things. Generally speaking, though, most of people just, attribute it to damage, wounds. But as stated here, and which is of the opinion of myself and other people, it's meant to represent a larger grouping of the body as a whole. Damage, energy, combat ability, your constitution as you start to degrade, your ability to keep up in fighting, and so on. And this is the crux of the problem. For such a definition just doesn't work. Okay? It tries to sum up two totally different things under one concept. Agreed. And that is like trying to mix oil and water. They don't go. The party fighting Minotaurs loses abstract hit points, but recovers them at the rate of healing wounds. Agreed. While the fighter chained up in the Dragon's Cave loses physical hit points and survives because he has so many abstract hit points to lose. There lies the connection between two complaints. Now, in my article, Combat and Armor Class in White Dwarf 6, I suggested that one way to improve the combat system in D&D without overly complaining it would be to keep hit points at a relatively stable figure of around 10, while improving armor classes as characters go up levels. This involved a tacit redefinition of hit points as referring exclusively to physical damage. After some experimentation and discussion since the article was published, I now rather feel that any redefinition must be made more explicit, and also that a straight increase of 1 AC per experience level is probably not the best answer. But before introducing my proposals for a new combat system to eliminate these difficulties, there's another term to define in a ghost to lay. How often have you heard this old chestnut? Armor doesn't make you harder to hit. It makes you easier to hit, but it absorbs the damage. Again, another kind of a point of contention within the hobby that's always been around. This is often voiced by exponents of tunnels and trolls. I understand. The basis of this complaint is simply a misunderstanding of the use of the word hit. In D&D, a hit is not a blow which makes contact. A hit is a blow that makes contact and hurts. Here's a breakdown of the result of a goblin hitting a man in plate mail. I'm using the old AC 9-2 table rather than the new 10-2 one chiefly because I can't see what earthly good introducing studded armor does, aside from mucking up everyone's nice, neat charts. A score of less than 10 indicates a complete miss, swinging at empty air. A score of 10 to 16 inclusive indicates that a goblin's blow has made contact, but that armor has absorbed the damage. A score of 17 and up shows that the blow has pierced the armor or hit an exposed area, thus doing real damage. With that out of the way, let me introduce my suggested revisions. All right, so so he goes on to explain, he's defining hit points and wounds differently. I'll just read those before moving on because he does go rather in depth here. And like I said, you can definitely read the rest of this article, on your own. But so he goes on to define hit points. Those refer to energy and combat resources at a character's disposal and not physical damage. They are calculated for each character in the usual way. They are lost when a character has to exert himself to avoid injury or when a character suffers a form of shock. This happens in normal combat. Whenever an opponent scores a hit against a character in the usual way, hits in combat are usually deemed to be blows coming sufficiently close to requiring evasive action rather than actually striking and wounding. Then there's wounds. When a character actually does suffer physical damage, he is wounded. The amount of wounding he can take is limited by his constitution points, which are assessed for each character in the usual way. Constitution points are lost whenever a blow is sufficiently powerful to penetrate all a character's defenses. When a character is wounded, the number of constitution points lost is equal to the normal damage roll for the attack, and at least the same number of hit points are lost at the same time. Okay. So he goes on to explain, aspects of restoring hit points and constitution, as far as striking wounds in combat, automatic wounds, the effects of the loss of hit points, which is another, point of contention that, if hit points do represent some sort of aspect of you being wounded, or even a loss of energy, or loss of ability, your performance should shrink also. Effective loss of constitution points, mortal wounds, and then carries on between fireballs, poison, and nastiness, and fatigue, and so on. So it's an interesting read. Granted, I know this particular conversation has been had, again and again several times over the many years, but know that that this particular aspect was a point of contention even way back in 1979. So, carrying on, we have Andy Slack. Andy Slack obviously is a fan of Traveller because he has an article called Expanding Universe where he has suggested additions to Traveller Rules Part 3. So, yes, he's got a lot of opinions about Traveller. Again, this is fairly detailed, but definitely something, Traveller also, the rules itself has gone through, a few changes throughout the years. So some of these things may reflect some of the changes that occur nowadays. But so he goes on to provide some information on camping location. There are several sorts of a region where camping is plausible. These are global clusters, open clusters, associations, and spiral arms. And then carries on through stellar systems. And provides a table to determine a spectral type, along with the various stars and quite a few information. And yes, if you've never experienced Traveller, especially the older versions of Traveller, it's for big nerds, of which I am one. I'm not throwing any shade, but details. The devil in the details. So, and then carrying on with more information regarding remnant stars, density of objects for use in space combat templates, as far as what they're doing. And we've got maths here, division and multiplication. And then carrying on, he describes a variety of planets and planetary systems. And determining and creating them within here, and determining such aspects of length of day and surface temperature and so on. And then providing information within there for the variety of alien life, such things as insectoids, avians, and others, ref specials. And then symmetry and main sense of most animals, visual, audio, tactile. And then carrying on with robots. Dice up robots as if they're a member of the constructing race. Except for the following points. and then goes on to provide other information for robots along with their cost. So thank you, Andy Slack, for providing that to definitely spice up your Traveler campaign way back in 1979. So next up we have the game, the little miniature board game that was provided by Ian Livingston here, called The Barbarian. So a brief history of it here. The world was chaos. Mankind was losing its battle against the onslaught of mutated beasts and undead creatures of the night. Civilization has long since disappeared, and it was brawn rather than brain that dictated the actions of the remnants of mankind. One such man of might and muscle was known as Varna. Dun, dun, dun. For many years, he had now been on a lone quest to recover the lost magical artifacts of the Old Fathers. With the sword and shield of the Old Fathers in his hand, Varna intended to bring about the reunification of mankind. The task was not easy, for the lands outside and villages were infested with foul beasts, and the trail behind him was red with blood. But Varn was unafraid and went on, for he was a barbarian, and possibly the last if he did not succeed. So, the object of the game, The Barbarian, is a two-player game representing the conquest of a lone barbarian. Varn is in his attempts to find the magic sword and shield of the Old Fathers in the creature-infested outlands. And then we go through the details of the game here. So we've got a variety of people or things to play with here. We got werewolves, barbarians, wild hillmen, race, zombies, goblins, and giants. Let's see here. Playing pieces. The general sequence of the game. So the player in control of the creatures set up first. So it's creatures versus the barbarian. The sword, shield, curse, and decoy icons should each be placed separately face down with one in each of the 6 regions. Once placed, these counters cannot be subsequently moved except when picked up by the barbarian. These counters should then be guarded by placing the various creatures in the respective regions. No stacking of counters is allowed. Creatures are not allowed to enter a hex with which the sword, shield, curse, or decoy icons are placed. The creatures are not allowed to leave their regions and may combine in an attack against the barbarian if he's in a hex. The player in control of the barbarian then rolls 2 6-sided dice to decide on which hex of those numbered on the Great West Road the barbarian starts his movement phase. All right, and let's see here. So here is the game in all its glory. I mean, obviously, I am not going to pull this out, but I could, get a copy of this online and print it out very easily, and obviously make a bigger copy than you would be able back in the day. But it's got, the counters, determining, the various effects as far as wounds and combat and the effects of the terrain. So this would be a fun little game to play. I have not played it, but for those of you who have, and I'm sure there's some of you out there, let us know. What was this game like? Was it fun? Was it a good time? Was it a nice little escape or palate cleanser between the other games you were playing? Okay, so give me a second here. All right, so, excuse me. So carrying on, we have Descent into the Depths of the Earth by Don Turnbull, as he goes on to describe how to run the new TSRD modules. I wonder just how many of those who have purchased the new TSR dungeon modules will actually run them. I say this not accusing my fellow dungeon masters of faint-heartedness, but because the modules are admittedly only suitable for a group of high-level characters, such as DMs who run Gygax campaigns, are hardly likely to have available among their regular players. Okay, so there's an accusatory tone there. Gygax in quotes, and obviously Gygax campaigns may be fairly deadly. Let's see here. What was I? And because anyone looking into these modules would quickly realize that they were not capable of being tackled in a single evening or even a succession of evenings. Frankly, even if a majority of copies of the modules are purchased for the excellent design advice they contain, I would not be surprised and don't think the designer would be unduly disappointed. Oh, geez, excuse me. And I don't mean because he gets some income from the sale. I have, however, been fortunate enough to be able to run D1 and D2, and shortly may even get the chance to run D3. It occurred to me that it might be helpful to others to pass on some hints, mainly gathered from other errors, which would enable them to run the modules better than I did. Some of these would be specific to the modules, but others will perhaps be useful in simpler settings. Interesting. So he goes on into more detail here. Oh, sorry. I've got to pause for a moment. I'm getting a call from my beautiful wife. Okay, sorry about that. When my wife calls this time of day, I definitely want to answer. She's a school teacher, and usually there's a good reason for her to call. So this one really wasn't one of them, but I always want to be certain. So Don Turnbull, yes, he goes on to provide a variety of information regarding the D series, which is, forgot to mention, Descent into the Depths of the Earth, as stated by the title, along with Shrine of the Koatoa, and also Vault of the Drow. What does he say? So we're not going to read the whole article again, but I just want to touch on it briefly. First, if you don't use figures. So he goes on to describe, as he's got some advice that would be specific to the modules. But so first off, he says, if you don't use figures or counters to represent the characters and the monsters, you would be wise to adopt such a habit for the D modules. So Theater of the Mind may not play well with this particular one, as he clearly states. Some of the melees you will have to run will be rather larger than you're probably used to in normal circumstances. There are 26 drow in the first encounter area, which probably makes for 36 in melee, including the characters. For a start, choose your own drow figures well in advance and try to ensure you can distinguish the low-level fighters, both male and female, with different melee characteristics, from the high-level fighters, again, both male and female, the the fighter/magic user, and the clerics of different levels. As usual in the case, when there will be more than one of the same type of figure in melee at the same time, label them so you can tell which is which at a glance. So, obviously, in this day and age, that can easily be circumvented if you're playing at a virtual tabletop. It's just a matter of just making a large enough map and copying and pasting the variety of tokens that distinguish between each one's there. But carrying on, prior to the party setting off, I suggest you draw up a roster of each character in play, showing certain basic items of information about that character. AC, the weapon normally used, a roll required to hit AC 2, or any other convenient base of reference. Saving rolls, any detect spells, and so on. Try to identify each figure the players are using so you can tell which figure is which character at a glance. All right, so what else does he say? Roll everything up in advance. Prepare a schedule of various notes a party could take, or routes, various routes a party could take on the journey, and roll up the wandering monsters they meet in advance. I also suggest you spend some time beforehand planning out the sort of tactics the various groups encountered would use in the given situation. The Drow outpost at D3 in Module D1 is a good case in point. They're there to defend the main route to the Drow Vault, and so would have a pretty good idea of what their actions would be in the event of an attack before an approaching party. By an approaching party. How would they and their female companions use their innate powers? What spells would the fighter/magic user employ? At what point would Vlandril attempt her escape? All right, and it carries on. And he concludes, I hope the amount of preparation, the general toughness of the modules for DM and players alike, the physical requirements of play, and the length of time taken will not deter others from running the D modules, or indeed the G modules. I have yet to try these. It should, unless something goes very wrong, be one of the most memorable D&D experiences you have. And yes, the D series, Descent into the Depths of the Earth, is a widely popular and continues to be a widely popular module, used both in old school and can be adapted to 5th edition. So, what do we have here? Open Box. Open Box is a examine science fiction and fantasy games and rule books currently in the shops, and they are reviews. So, first off, we have Metagaming Microgames talking about Ice War and Black Hole. Which combined make Ice Hole. I amuse myself. So, ultimately, I'm not going to go through the whole review here, but Ice War simulates the Eurasian Socialist Alliance raid on Arctic oil fields held by the U.S. and vital to her war economy. And Black Hole, let's see here. Black Hole is a unique little game, fascinating and appealing, which lives up to the characteristics of the micro game. It deserves to be very popular indeed. Okay, sorry. Oh, here we are. In contrast, Black Hole is the ideal micro game and may well become the most popular. It deals with tactical warfare on an asteroid which is shaped like a donut, and this results in all sorts of surprising and unfamiliar things. Right. Okay. So. And what is it? What do they say about Ice War? Let's see. Excellent though the idea is, I can't help feeling the subject would be better handled in a larger, more expansive and expensive format. So, thumbs down on Ice War and thumbs up on Black Hole. And then next up we have King Arthur's Knights. The object of this game is quite simple. Each player is represented by either a knight errant, knight at arms, or great knight. And by killing monsters and taking their treasure, the knight receives chivalry points. The game is won by the first player to reach Camelot with his or her required number of chivalry points and treasure in Byzance. So, and they say, on the whole, the game is simple to understand. The rules are printed clearly in an easy-to-read steps in a 16-page booklet with the 3 combat tables printed on the back cover. The physical quality of the game is quite good, the map especially. The only drawbacks are that no dice or reasonable counters are provided, and the combat system depends too much on luck for a good result. All right. And then we have the Traveler Aids from Judges Guild, a Traveler Screen, the Traveler Logbook, and Starships and Spacecraft. Overall, the Traveler Shield is a 7, Traveler Logbook is a 9, and Starships and Spacecraft only a 5. And then we have Animal Encounters. The 6th booklet to be published in the Traveler system is a referee aid covering pre-generated animal encounters for 11 terrain types and 9 world classes. All in all, though, the format is simple to use and lucidly explain and index in the brief introductory section, and the overall standard is well up to be expected from GDW. And then moving on, we have a group of items and things to show in Treasure Chest, which is open for contributions relating to D&D additional rules, character classes, magic systems, objects, tricks, and traps, etc. So we have Lou Pulsifer determining height and weight. He provides a nice table here for determining the height and weight of men, women, elf, dwarves, and gnomes. And then from Simon Shaw, we have him providing an alternative for energy drainers. Rather than losing experience and losing experience levels, I should say, he feels that it's a ridiculous notion that people would just forget how to be, what they've learned, as opposed to just losing certain qualities of their abilities, such as strength, constitution points, and so on. And then again, we have Lou Pulsifer, Who Goes to Sleep, and this one deals with a vexing problem every D&D referee soon faces. It is determined who is affected by the sleep spell on a party with mixed hit dice values. So again, he provides you with some tables to kind of assist with that if you don't want to just, essentially tally it all up and figure it out by hand. He provides some assistance to that. And then we have a slew of magic items. One of which I will just read here. What about, Zalen's Sleeping Suit by Fred Kendall. This is a beautifully inscribed suit of armor with a dragon's head inlaid with gold on the breastplate. Most fighters would dearly like to own such a magnificent suit of armor. Unfortunately, the suit was once in the ownership of an evil wizard known as Zalen, who cast a terrible spell on the suit. Let's see here. 1 hour after the owner has put on the suit, he will fall asleep for 15 turns with no saving throw allowed. Assuming the fighter does not fall asleep in the middle of combat and reawakes, he will find the armor will protect him thereafter at +2. It has an intrinsic value of 2,500 gold pieces. All right, then we have the famous Fiend Factory. These were where the monsters were presented and represented that would eventually become the famed Fiend Folio for AD&D. I'm sure many people in the hobby know that, but for those who don't, Fiend Folio was, was something that began in White Dwarf. And so we have such crazy things as the Heat Monster, the Tachyrnid, Tachyrnid. Tachyrnid? All right, whatever. The Dragon Dog, the Russian Doll Monster, the Time Freezer, and the Pebble Gnome. The Russian Doll Monster is an interesting one by Mike Ferguson. When first sighted, the Russian Doll Monster will have the appearance of a stone giant and all the characteristics, hit probability, and so on of that creature. However, when it's taken hit points, the skin will peel back, disintegrate as it does to reveal a hill giant inside. This will fight as a standard hill giant until it has taken a further 10 hit points, whereupon the skin peels back and an ogre appears. The process continues on the following lines. 10 hit points Bugbear, 9 Gnoll, 8 Hobgoblin, 7 Orc, 6 Goblin, and 5 Kobold with 4 hit points. Here one would think the logical end to the sequence, but no. Springing from the dying remains of the Kobold, like a bullet from a gun, comes the Leprechaun, which has been operating the whole doll. It will immediately turn invisible, grab the nearest item of value, preferably a magic one, and do its best to escape with it. Needless to say, these creatures will only be found as wandering monsters and will attack on sight. Comments. I'd like to include an oddball monster from time to time, and this is a good one. Mike calculates the monster mark as 219.3, which makes it pretty tough. A level 8 in 12 levels and a whole level higher than the initial stone giant. Which only goes to show, inside every giant, there's a leprechaun trying to get out. And then we have a listing for a variety of game clubs, not just in the UK. It does show a couple things in the US, but most of them are UK-centric. Quite a variety in London, but we do have... Let's see here. We have, a listing for Los Angeles, USA, Alliance of Fantasy and Simulation War Games, out in Temple City, Los Angeles. And I think that is the only one here represented. But I did see something that kind of piqued my interest over in the Dundee War Game Society, which D&D, RuneQuest, the Ardarin Grimoire, Science Fiction and Fantasy Board Games, Douglas Community Center, Dundee. So that sounds like a fun one, especially with the Ardarin Grimoire. And an advertisement here at the bottom from Eon Games, Darkover, The Age of Chaos. Know absolutely nothing about that. And then we have Help. Clubs, contacts, and events can be further advertised once at no charge. So let's see one here. Middle-earth Wargaming. Beginners in Liverpool want advice and contacts. Please contact Christopher Duff. 3 Glenville Close, Liverpool. We have one here. Where's another one that I saw? Let's see here. D&D Barnet. Newcomer to D&D seeks experienced DM. Club or existing campaign. Also interested in learning any other fantasy sci-fi games. Andrew Realstone. Andrew, I hope you found a group. And then we are going to kind of conclude here as it's going to close upon, just more advertisements. Get together at Games Gallery. Visit us at Glasgow. We have another advertisement for Games Unlimited in Surrey, and some other minors here. Let's see here. We have Forever People, which is a known name, and Games of Liverpool, which is another one that I'm not familiar with, but several of my UK friends are, and they have quite a listing of stuff here. The D&D basic rules for only, £2.96 or 95. The D&D Advanced Monster Manual for $4.50 for a softback, and then $6.95 for a hardback. Really? Was there a softback available in UK? Anyways. Yeah, D&D Advanced Player's Handbook. More details on characters. So yeah, spells, etc. Softback, $4.50. Hardback, $6.95. Interesting. Yeah, I'm aware that there are separate printings or different printings for over in the UK than there were in the States, and they're collector's items, at least here in the States. Other things listed here: Teagle Manor for $350. We've got G1 Hill Giant's Lair for $195. And carrying on, what's some other things here? Apple Lane, 2 RuneQuest scenarios with extra rules, $295. Chivalry and Sorcery, available to you for $650. Wow. Traveler, the game that did for sci-fi what D&D did for fantasy. 3-book box set, enable you to plan the universe of your choice. $595. Gamma World, $695. And so on and so on and so on. And then we close with the advertisement for Games Workshop, telling us AD&D Dungeon Master's Guide now out, $9.95, which is not listed over at Games of Liverpool. So yes, you'd have to wait for it to arrive there. But if you're in London, Games Workshop has it out right now. Go grab it. Oh, and then we have this wonderful advertisement for Gamma World. I don't know if this particular advertisement was just in the UK. I don't know if it was in Dungeon. It could have been. I'd have to look. But yes, so as you can see, welcome to Gamma World. We have the band Heart, who is representing here. It's not Heart, but it very well could be. But yes, Gamma World, we've been expecting you. So Illusion Generation and Unknown Mutation is your welcome to Gamma World, science fantasy role playing. So yeah, Gamma World is a complete game for 3 or more adults. The colorful game box contains rules, a playing map of the devastated content, and a set of 5 polyhedra dice, and also hot 70s chicks in tinfoil outfits. I mean, what more could you want from a post-apocalyptic tabletop role playing game? So there we go. There we go. That has been White Dwarf issue number 15, October through November 1979. So, as you can tell, this one most definitely is different. The layout is different than Dungeon is. It's not quite as dense. I meant Dragon. Not quite as dense as a lot of the Dragon books are or magazines are. And realistically, I do prefer, from what I've seen in a lot of the White Dwarf magazines, I do prefer it to be a little bit less, dense content-wise, because it seems to be focused on exactly what it's providing within there, and there doesn't seem to be quite as much filler as you would find in there. But again, unfortunately, it changes as time goes on and doesn't stand as a generic role-playing game and games and miniature games and so on. Fanzine magazine as it becomes the house magazine for Games Workshop's miniature wargaming exclusively. But we will venture back and take a look at some other ones and see what wonderful treasures and wisdom lie within both White Dwarf, Dragon. Sorry, why I keep saying Dungeon, but I may take a look at Dungeon too. And other ones as I go through my collection and see what I can find and present here. But there you go. This has been yet another completely unprofessional unboxing. No, this has been It's Pronounced Zine. And thank you all for watching. And I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you feel so inclined, give a like and subscribe and all the usual stuff. And again, if you're interested in reading this more in depth, there will be a link to the digital copy, the digital PDF from Mana Archive in there. And if you like this, let me know. I appreciate it. I got a lot of wonderful feedback on the first episode of this series, and I enjoy doing it. It's a lot of fun going back and taking a look at these old magazines, whether they're ones that I'm just discovering for the first time or ones that I know and am somewhat nostalgic for. And also, before I go, check out Titterpigs, the tabletop role-playing game podcast I do with my friend Keith from Rolling Boxcars. And hopefully we'll be having some more episodes coming out soon. Everyone, have a wonderful day.